The circus rolled into Dansville like a storm cloud, unwelcome and ominous. The sky darkened as if nature itself was warning the townsfolk of the impending doom. The caravan, a procession of dilapidated wagons and eerie silhouettes, moved slowly, casting long shadows on the cobblestone streets. It wasn't the joyous occasion the townsfolk had anticipated. Instead of the vibrant colours and cheerful music they had hoped for, they were met with a sombre and unsettling atmosphere. The excitement that usually accompanied a circus was replaced by a heavy sense of foreboding. A pall of silence hung over the caravan, punctuated by the restless pacing of caged animals. The creatures, usually the stars of the show, seemed agitated and uneasy, their eyes reflecting the same dread that had settled over the town. The carnival grounds, shrouded in a perpetual twilight, were eerily quiet, the laughter and music expected of such places conspicuously absent. The ride stood still, their once bright paint now faded and peeling, adding to the sense of decay and abandonment. The only sounds were the distant haunting melody of a calliope and the rustle of the wind through the tattered flags that hung limply in the heavy air. The music, once meant to bring joy, now seemed to mock the silence, its notes echoing like a ghostly lament. Dansville was a town that clung to its secrets, nestled deep in the heartland and untouched by the relentless march of time. Its vintage buildings, with their weathered facades and creaking doors, stood as silent witnesses to the passage of years, guarding the mysteries that lay within. Its inhabitants, weathered and wary, viewed outsiders with suspicion. They had seen many come and go, but none like this. The circus, with its strange performers and eerie atmosphere, was unlike anything they had ever encountered. The circus, with its motley crew of performers and strange beasts, was an unwelcome intrusion, a crack in the facade of their peaceful existence. The performers, with their painted faces and peculiar costumes, moved with an unsettling grace, their eyes glinting with secrets untold. A collective unease settled upon the town, a creeping dread that whispered on the wind. The once familiar streets now seemed alien, the shadows lengthening and twisting into shapes that defied explanation. Parents clutched their children a little closer, their eyes darting nervously towards the shadows that seemed to lengthen with each passing moment. The children, sensing their parents' fear, remained unusually quiet, their wide eyes reflecting the growing terror. The circus, with its deceptive gaiety, had brought a darkness with it, a chilling premonition that something was terribly wrong. The bright lights and colourful tents did little to dispel the sense of dread that hung in the air like a thick fog. Even the carnival games, usually a source of amusement, held a sinister air. The once cheerful booths now seemed like traps, their prizes mocking the players with their grotesque appearances. The prizes, once plush and inviting, were now faded and grotesque. Their once bright colours had dulled and their fabric had frayed, giving them a macabre appearance that sent shivers down the spines of those who dared to look. Their glass eyes seemed to follow passers-by with an unnerving intensity. It was as if they were alive, watching and waiting, their gaze piercing through the souls of those who dared to meet it. The air itself crackled with an unseen energy, a palpable tension that sent shivers down the spines of even the most skeptical onlookers. The townsfolk, usually so rational and grounded, found themselves succumbing to the growing sense of fear and unease. The circus had arrived, and with it a creeping terror that would soon consume the town. The storm clouds that had heralded its arrival now loomed ominously overhead, casting a dark shadow over Dansville and sealing its fate. The circus folk, with their painted smiles and vacant eyes, did little to alleviate the growing sense of unease that permeated the air. They moved through the town like phantoms, their presence felt rather than seen, leaving a trail of whispers in their wake. Their laughter, when it came, was hollow and mirthless, devoid of any genuine joy or warmth. Stories began to circulate, whispered tales of strange occurrences and unexplained disappearances that chilled the bones. Animals went missing from nearby farms, their bones later found arranged in disturbing patterns on the outskirts of town, adding to the mystery. The townsfolk, their suspicions growing, began to avoid the circus altogether, fearing what they might find. Only the bravest, or perhaps the most foolish, dared to venture into the circus after dark, seeking answers. Those who did spoke of an unsettling silence that descended upon the grounds once the crowds had dispersed, a silence that felt alive. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of popcorn and fear, mingling in an almost tangible way. It was as if the circus itself were holding its breath, waiting for something or someone to break the spell. At the heart of the disquiet was Bobo, the clown, a towering figure with a shock of green hair and a painted grin that never reached his eyes. Bobo was the circus's star attraction. Bobo wasn't like the other clowns, the ones who brought laughter and joy to children. His act was different, laced with a subtle menace that set the audience on edge. His jokes were dark, his movements jerky and unsettling. He seemed to delight in frightening the children, his cackle echoing long after his act had ended. His laughter, a high-pitched cackle that seemed to claw its way out of his throat, sent shivers down the spines of children and adults alike. His painted smile, frozen in a grotesque parody of mirth, did little to hide the chilling glint in his eyes. There was something undeniably predatory about Bobo, a darkness that lurked just beneath the surface, waiting for the opportune moment to break free. The group of teenagers, 6 in all, stood huddled at the edge of the circus grounds, their breath visible in the cold night air. They exchanged nervous glances, each one silently questioning the wisdom of their latest adventure. The night was moonless, the only light coming from the flickering neon sign that hung precariously above the entrance. The sign cast eerie shadows that danced on the ground, making the already ominous atmosphere even more unsettling. The sign, battered and faded, depicted a grinning clown that bore a striking resemblance to Bobo, the infamous clown known for his sinister smile. The paint was peeling, and the once vibrant colours had dulled with time, adding to the sense of foreboding. It had started, as most bad decisions do, with a dare, a simple, seemingly harmless challenge that quickly spiraled into something much more serious. The idea had been tossed around casually, but now, standing at the threshold of the dark circus, it felt anything but casual. They were the local daredevils, testing their limits and pushing their luck. Each one had a reputation to uphold, a persona of fearlessness that they were determined to maintain no matter the cost. Tonight, their challenge was simple: sneak into the circus after hours and retrieve a memento. It sounded easy enough in the safety of daylight, but now, under the cover of darkness, it seemed like a monumental task. A piece of the big top, a clown's nose, or any other piece of circus memorabilia would suffice. Anything to prove they had been there, to show their bravery and solidify their status as the ultimate risk-takers. Anything to prove they had been there. The thought of the trophy they would bring back was the only thing keeping their fear at bay.
This is a bad idea. Emily's voice trembled as she spoke, her eyes wide with apprehension. We should just go home. Her words hung in the air, a stark contrast to the bravado that had brought them here.
Her voice was barely audible above the wind. The trees around them rustled, as if whispering secrets of the past, adding to the eerie ambience. She pulled her jacket tighter around her, as if to ward off the encroaching darkness. The cold seemed to seep into her bones, making her shiver uncontrollably. Her words were met with a chorus of scoffs and dismissive snickers. The others, eager to prove their courage, brushed off her concerns with a wave of their hands.
Come on, Emily. Don't be such a scaredy cat. It's just a circus. The words were meant to be reassuring, but they only served to heighten the tension. What's the worst that could happen? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as the group steeled themselves for what lay ahead.
Their youthful arrogance, fueled by a potent cocktail of bravado and peer pressure, blinded them to the very real danger that lurked within the shadows of the silent circus. They were too caught up in the thrill of the dare to see the warning signs all around them. They were about to discover that some dares are best left untaken. The silent circus, with its darkened tents and eerie silence, held secrets that were better left undisturbed. As they took their first tentative steps into the unknown, the night seemed to close in around them, sealing their fate. The air inside the circus tent was thick with the smell of sawdust and something else, something metallic and cloying. It was a scent that clung to the back of their throats, making it hard to breathe, adding to the sense of dread that permeated the atmosphere. The teenagers moved cautiously through the maze of ropes and rigging, their footsteps echoing ominously in the silence. Each step they took seemed to amplify the eerie quiet, making the shadows around them feel even more menacing. They whispered to each other, their voices barely audible, as if afraid to disturb whatever might be lurking in the darkness. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the occasional beam of moonlight that pierced through the tattered canvas of the tent. These fleeting glimpses of light did little to dispel the overwhelming sense of foreboding. Instead, they cast long, twisted shadows that seemed to dance and shift with a life of their own, adding to the surreal and terrifying ambience.
This is creepy. I don't like this. The words were barely a whisper, but they carried the weight of the fear that gripped them all.
He was about to elaborate when a blood-curdling scream ripped through the silence. It was a sound so primal and filled with terror that it seemed to freeze time itself. The teenagers froze, their blood turning to ice in their veins. They exchanged panicked glances, each one reflecting the same unspoken question. What was that? The scream, filled with raw terror and unimaginable pain, seemed to go on forever, echoing around the empty tent before fading into an unsettling silence. The silence that followed was almost worse, a heavy, oppressive quiet that seemed to press down on them from all sides. Panic surged through the group. They could feel their hearts pounding in their chests, each beat a reminder of their vulnerability. They stumbled blindly through the darkness, their hearts pounding in their chests. Every shadow seemed to hide a new threat, every sound a potential danger. They had to keep moving, had to find a way out. They had to get out, had to escape the nightmare that was unfolding around them. The sense of urgency was palpable, driving them forward, even as fear threatened to paralyze them. But the circus, like a predator toying with its prey, had other plans. It seemed to shift and change around them, turning every attempt at escape into a futile exercise. The walls of the tent seemed to close in, the shadows growing darker and more oppressive, as if the circus itself was alive and determined to keep them trapped within its nightmarish embrace.